In 1981, an agronomist from Australia went to Niger to plant trees on some of the most degraded farmland on Earth. Almost every tree he planted died out. Heat killed some of them. Others died in dust storms. The others were cut up for firewood before they had a chance to grow. He was about to give up after years of failure. Then one ordinary afternoon, letting air out of the tires on his truck on a sandy track, he saw something. That one roadside moment in 1983 ultimately led to the regeneration of over 5 million hectares of farmland in one country. Tony Rinaudo was born in 1957 in Wangaratta, regional Victoria, Australia, and trained as an agronomist before taking up the role that would come to define his career. He was in his early 20s when he arrived in Niger in 1981, working with Serving in Mission on a tree planting project in the Maradi region. He worked on land where there was almost nothing left. The tree density was about 4 per hectare, but in many places there were none at all. People simply described it as a moonscape. Decades of drought and famine had stripped the landscape to bare, wind-blown soil, and farming techniques brought in from elsewhere, combined with a growing population's insatiable appetite for firewood and new farmland, had taken their toll. Rinaudo did what a trained, dedicated agronomist in his spot would have done. He put in trees. Every year, the technique reached around 70,000 people, and approximately 1,000 trees were planted. For 70,000 people, about 1,000 trees were planted, resulting in the planting of thousands of trees using conventional nursery-grown seedlings. And nearly all of them perished. Survival rates were as low as 10%. Seedlings that survived heat or dust storms were often cut for firewood by families needing fuel that week more than they needed a forest in the years to come. It was challenging, expensive work, and from all the signs he could see at the time, it wasn't working. Rinaudo has described reaching a really low ebb, questioning whether his time in Niger had been a mistake. That was 1983. It was in the Maradi department, on a dirt road between villages. Rinaudo had stopped to let down the tires, a standard procedure for driving on loose sand. Something low to the ground caught his eye while he waited. A small bush he had driven past many times before without a second glance. This time he seemed to be looking much closer. It was not a separate species of shrub. It was a stump, coming back from a tree that was already down. That distinction was more important than it might sound at first. Some 30 to 50% of the original biomass of a felled tree is left underground, alive, in the root system, hidden beneath the cleared, dry surface of the land, and invisible to anyone simply looking across the surface of a field. When left alone, that root system can regrow into a full tree in about 3 to 5 years, much faster than starting a tree from seed. The land wasn't quite as dead as it looked from the surface. However, the root system never had a chance to grow back. Farmers would clear or burn the regrowth before planting their crops each season, and any livestock that grazed in the fields would eat any shoots that managed to appear. Rinaudo didn't have to plant a forest that had never been here before. This was the forest that had been trying to come back on its own, quietly, underground, all along. He'd have to stop erasing it. It was, as he would later describe it, a forest under the earth, invisible from above, waiting only for the chance to be left alone long enough to grow. He began testing the idea with a small group of about 10 volunteer farmers, urging them to find and protect naturally resprouting stumps on their land, rather than clearing them away. He gave the method a formal name that would later travel far beyond Niger: farmer-managed natural regeneration. The initial reactions were not encouraging, and in some cases were frankly hostile. In a culture where a tidy, totally cleared field was the sign of a serious farmer, farmers who tried the method were mocked by their neighbors. Local nicknames attached to Rinaudo himself translated roughly as the Mad White Farmer and the Crazy Dirty Farmer, tags that stuck with him for years. To many, the deliberate retention of trees and brush seemed like laziness or neglect, not a considered strategy deserving of serious consideration. On several occasions, farmers trying out the technique had their regenerating trees deliberately felled at night by neighbors who felt uncomfortable with the visible change. The pivotal moment occurred in 1984, when a catastrophic famine ravaged the entire Sahel, further endangering communities already precariously situated on the brink. Rinaudo's organization had a food-for-work program, where food aid was exchanged for work, and that work included practicing farmer-managed natural regeneration on their land. In that single year, the technique reached some 70,000 people in about 100 villages, covering some 12,500 hectares almost overnight. It wasn't adopted at that scale because people suddenly saw the long-term value. But once farmers witnessed the early outcomes firsthand, many continued long after the food aid ended. From there, adoption came steadily through the rest of the 1980s and into the 1990s, not so much through top-down government programs, but through farmers showing other farmers what was quietly happening on their land. It was disseminated through exchange visits, informal training days, and word of mouth. And by most credible accounts, it was in the end a true farmer-led movement, built up one field, one harvest, and one convinced neighbor at a time. In 1999, Rinaudo officially signed on with World Vision Australia, a position that would eventually enable him to take the method far beyond the borders of Niger and the Maradi department. By 2004, a formal mapping study confirmed what had been quietly brewing for 2 solid decades. Now nearly half of Niger's agricultural land, about 5 million hectares, consists of farmer-managed natural regeneration. Across that land, the density of trees increased from about 4 trees per hectare in the early 1980s to more than 40. In total, the country added an estimated 200 million more trees. The impacts on food security were direct and measurable. Today, Niger's farmers produce an estimated 500,000 more tons of cereal each year. Enough food to feed about 2.5 million people who didn't have that food security before. The annual hungry season dropped from around 6 months to less than 1 month. The method did not remain in Niger. Sometime between 2004 and 2005, a project began in the Humbo region of Ethiopia as part of a World Bank partnership to generate carbon credits. This project puts land back into use and is projected to sequester an estimated 181,650 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Later, Ethiopia's government promised to reforest 15 million hectares using the same approach. In Ghana, a version has been adopted in the Talensi district. And in Senegal, approximately 50,000 hectares have been regenerated in the Kaffrine and Diorbel regions over the past 4 years. Now, it is said, more than 1 million individual farmers in Malawi practice some form of the technique on their land. The same basic idea also took root in Indonesia, Myanmar, and East Timor. By 2025, farmer-managed natural regeneration had been used in more than 40 countries, with a total of more than 18 million hectares regenerated. World Vision has since announced an ambition to expand active programs into more than 70 countries within 5 years. That's not to say the method works equally well everywhere. Regeneration is limited by grazing pressure and colonial-era forestry laws that still require permits, a burden that falls hardest on women and younger farmers. In 2018, Rinaudo received the Right Livelihood Prize for proving that it is indeed possible to restore severely dry, damaged land on a large scale and at low cost, almost without any outside funding. He was also made a member of the Order of Australia and received Niger's highest honor for a foreign national, the Order of Agriculture with Merit, for 18 years of direct service to Niger. Since then, the method has been referenced by UN bodies as a real hunger reduction strategy. It now forms part of World Vision's contribution to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Rinaudo wasn't making a new tree or finding a hidden forest. He just saw that what looked like dead, empty land was alive underground, waiting for permission to grow back. Sometimes you don't have to plant anything new to restore millions of acres. It just takes someone willing to stop clearing away what was already trying to come back.